Hi everyone, my name is Laura and welcome to Book Bubbler. Well, we are finally done with the second round of the Booktube Prize for 2020. This round I was in nonfiction, Group B. And if you can remember at the beginning of March where we were at collectively in the world. I mean, we knew about COVID-19, we knew about all this stuff, but it was really starting to hit home for most of us right around the beginning of March. I think this was before the majority of the states went into lockdown or anything like that. So I was excited to get my notifications and see what I was going to be reading for this round. Excited that it was going to be nonfiction versus fiction, which I had the first time. And it's been a doozy of a read, let me tell you. So, what books were in my group, you ask? Well, we have a book about how we are environmentally essentially pretty screwed. A book about women in ISIS. A book about an abusive lesbian relationship. A book about domestic violence. A book about Harvey Weinstein and sexual abuse, sexual predators. And to wrap it all up in a nice, delicious bow, a serial killer who didn't get caught for a very long time. So, it was hard to motivate myself to read a lot of these books because I was so anxious and unsure, and it's just a lot of upsetting information. So it took me a long time to try and read all of these books. Of course, I finished them. And I'd like to use words, Laura. I would like to thank my friends Angie, Jenna, and Michelle for buying books for me and letting me read them right away so I didn't have to spend them myself because I haven't earned anything since May 9th. I'd like to thank Michelle especially for reading the Women in ISIS book along with me because I knew I was going to have a hard time with it, just trying to keep things straight ahead of time based on other reviews I had seen of this book. So thank you, Michelle, Angie, and Jenna for helping get these books in my hands because libraries were closed too. So let's try to make this as short as possible, shall we? So in order, number 6, Guest House for Young Widows Among the Women of ISIS by Azadeh Moaveni. This follows mostly 7 girls, but there are 13 that are like the main girls that you follow throughout their joining ISIS, you know, why they joined, what their life was like when they first got to the Middle East, how many countries they hopped to, if they sort of fell out of love with the ideals of ISIS or not, or there's a lot in here, a lot, and the author certainly knows her stuff. My gosh, does she know her stuff. It is not badly written. None of these books are badly written. I mean, they're all good books. However, it was confusing. Part of that is my fault because I am not familiar with not only the geography of the countries in the Middle East so much, but I'm also not familiar with the religion, with Islam, with Muslimism, and with the literal hundreds of offshoots and sects and extremism things. And that is extremely confusing on its own, let alone following all these different girls through time. And I mean, it was infuriating because a lot of them were just lost teenagers looking for something to make them feel like they belonged, make them feel like they were standing out, like they were being good citizens. If schools and parents or anyone would have just asked a few questions, I think at least half of these girls would not have gone into ISIS. But once they're there, whew, it's rough, you know. Interesting, fascinating, confusing. I couldn't tell you anyone's names in this book. I couldn't have told you anyone's names in the book a chapter or two past where the action was where they were. If you have an interest in this subject matter, by all means, go pick this up. If you want to learn more about ISIS, more about how events unfolded in the last 10 years, up to almost current day, I believe, go pick this up. But for me, this was just, I couldn't. So this was number 6 for me. Number 5 was audiobook, and that is, oh my gosh, why can't I remember the name of this book? It's so terrible. In the Dream House, my goodness, by Carmen Maria Machado. Whew, Laura. I listened to this on audiobook, and it's read by the author. I have to say, I really recommend that way, listening to it that way, reading it that way. So Carmen Maria Machado was in a verbally, emotionally abusive relationship with a woman. You start to feel, at least I did when listening to it, I'm not sure what a reading experience would be like, but you really are right there with her. You really feel her anxiety. You feel her when she thinks she's being stalked. Like the snaps of her girlfriend when they'd be having a conversation and she'll say something jokingly, very innocuous and in the same vein of something they were talking about. And then her girlfriend would just say, "What did you just say?" You know, and lose it. What her parents and friends told her about the relationship when she was in the relationship. I mean, it's a lot. It's also set up a little bit differently in terms of layout. Each chapter, sometimes they were 10 pages long. Sometimes it was just a little paragraph or a sentence. So that style, that layout of the book was hard to adapt to over audio at first. I was confused as to what was happening, because it kept saying chapters all the time, but it wasn't. It was sometimes third person, it was sometimes first person. You know, she's a wonderful writer, and I would like to read Her Body and Other Parties, her first book. I believe it's a short story collection. But for me, after reading all the other ones, it was good, but because of its unusual structure, and I don't know, I felt like I could have used a little something more, and I don't know what that something is, but interested to follow her in future. And yeah, number 5. So number 4 for me, I struggled with 4 and 3, where to put where, but just based on readability, I put this one 4th, and that is The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming by David Wallace-Wells. So David Wallace-Wells is a very smart man. He uses science and facts and data to back up everything. Not so you get historically accurate parts of what people thought in the 60s or 90s or 3 years ago, whichever it is, and then how it is now and what the numbers are regarding pollution levels and degrees of warming and the availability of fresh water and how clean that fresh water is. It's fascinating, and I appreciate so much the amount of work that went into this that was research-based and looking up papers and talking to people, and really, really interesting. This was, so the Women of ISIS book was the first one that gave me nightmares and made me extremely anxious. This was the second of, not the last, book that made me feel the same way. Seeing the hard data and seeing where we are and where we're probably going to be, just based on how things are either very slowly moving or regressing right now, especially in the States. Terrifying. And it should be terrifying. It is scary. It's really scary. But excellent, wonderful. If I was going to read any book about climate change, and we're beyond that now, the climate has changed, but anything about the environment and where we actually are and where we are realistically going to be in the very near future, in a year or 2 or 5 in our lifetimes, this is the only book I can think of to possibly read that's not just fear-mongering and scary. Very well written, interesting, terrifying, rightfully so. So this was my 4th pick. And again, none of these are bad books. So number 3, and this was just because I found it more readable and it flowed a lot better for me was American Predator, The Hunt for the Most Meticulous Serial Killer of the 21st Century by Maureen Callahan. So this follows sort of in real time how police finally caught this man in Alaska. They caught him in the lower 48 though, but how they were tracing his last victim and how screwed up it is that none of the departments talk to each other in states, in cities, in counties, but also around the country when there is big missing problems, you know, teenage girls missing and women and wives that just vanish, or couples that just vanish and no one says anything to like the next county over, you know. It's infuriating. It's also infuriating because I know how Alaska is. My uncle lived there for most of his life, and the attitude of a lot of the people that live there and a lot of the people that work on the governmental level, all the different levels and all the different departments. I'm not saying everybody, I'm not bad-mouthing the state, but how backwards and egocentric and how it can really be in Alaska. So talking to detectives and talking to departments and talking to, I mean, it just, everything was like, yes, this is so accurate to everything that I know in my life about the state. This man is incredibly terrifying, and I'm so glad that they finally caught him. However they had to do it, innocuous as it was as a traffic stop, but how it devolves, how he spins out the story and tries to like reveal who he killed and where the body might be and why, and he's really trying to run the show when he shouldn't be. But anyways, if you like true crime, if you like serial killers and stuff like I do, this is really, really good, really excellent. This is also the only one of the 6 on the list that I knew I wanted to read ahead of time, that I was aware of and was like, yep, I'm going to read that. So I was a little biased towards it anyways, just because it's about true crime and serial killers, but well written, pulled me right along. I read this in under 24 hours and I didn't have to. I just sucked me right in. So number 3. Then number 2 and number 1, I waffled a bit as to what I was going to put where. Either one of these could have easily been number 1. But on a little more reflection, I'm okay with this. So number 2 for me was Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow. This is amazing. It covers not only the Harvey Weinstein sexual abuses, sexual assaults, how it was covered up on every level, not only at NBC, though this is most of the focus because Ronan Farrow was working for NBC at the time, how high it went up, the collusion that happened, but also once he's no longer at NBC, just everywhere else. The amount of cover-up and the fear of being sued and the fear of Harvey Weinstein that was prevalent all across, I mean, almost all borders. So you follow that, you follow Donald Trump and Matt Lauer as well, and their sexually abusive history towards women, how they rape women, and yeah. So how long news outlets knew about stuff and couldn't or wouldn't mostly say anything. It's infuriating, but you know, it happens all the time. I mean, you just do. But so interesting, so well written. I have so much respect for Ronan Farrow. Clear-cut, honest. I don't know him. I don't follow him anywhere else. I have only read this book. I mean, that's all I know, but wow. Wow. Just amazing. Not nightmare-inducing and not terrifying like some of the others were for me. Made me angry, of course, but you know about it anyways. You know, abuse of power happens regardless of the gender, though it's mostly men, regardless of the sphere you're in, if it's sports or entertainment or anything, it doesn't matter. Like, people at the top can be very abusive with, you know, huge egos, all that stuff. So I'm not saying this very well, and I'm not going to do very well on the next book either. Spoiler. as I feel too much and it's hard to get it into words. And I have tried, believe me. Excellent, wonderful, stupendous reporting. Yeah, it's just so excellent. Please read this book. So that leaves me for number 1, No Visible Bruises. What we don't know about domestic violence can kill us, by Rachel Louise Snyder. This, rightfully so, is on the top of a lot of lists. Whew. This gave me massive anxiety, panic attacks, nightmares. Part of that is because of the kind of person that I am. I'm incredibly sensitive. I'm an empath. I can't watch the news. It is too upsetting. I've never been able to really watch the news. Stuff I hear, statistics, if I know a specific about a story, about exactly how someone abused someone else, that never leaves my brain and comes back to haunt me at 2 in the morning. There's stuff I have been told when I was a teenager in high school that keeps me up at night. Like, that's just the kind of person that I am. It's how my brain is wired. Believe me, I wish that wasn't the case, but that's how I am. So to read a book about what we don't know about domestic violence was really difficult. Rachel Louise Snyder breaks this up into 3 chunks. So the first part is the ending. The second part is the beginning. The third part is the middle. In the first part, the ending, you follow the case of a woman, Michelle Moser, in Montana. The killing of her 2 children, and then the suicide of her husband and the father of those children. And what happened, how the relationship evolved from the start, how Rocky, the husband, changed, how he was so controlling, the abuse not only against Michelle, but against their children, what law enforcement mostly did not do. Michelle talks to everyone involved in the case, both Michelle and Rocky's parents, their siblings, friends, all levels of law enforcement involved in this case, and people that would be involved in domestic cases anyways. Really hard to read, fascinating as hell. The second part follows another really interesting group of people. So the beginning, which is what this is called, mostly follows groups set both in and out of prison, or people who have recently been released from prison, and trying to rehabilitate men into being human beings, essentially. How it's okay to feel, how it's okay to cry, it's okay to be angry. When you feel angry, why you get triggered for violence then, how their body language is, how the words they use influence what happens, how it teaches them to see how other people see them. And yeah, it's fascinating, and it's incredibly effective. It's not 100%, nothing ever could be, of course, for anything, but like something like the recidivism rate is like 70-some% for reoffending once someone has been to jail for domestic abuse or domestic violence. It's incredibly high for them to abuse again, and then it just escalates from there. But if they successfully go through this program, it's like 15% or something. And while the cost at the outset is more than it would be to not do this program, just the literal millions of dollars that are saved over the long run to really help the people that need help the most, so the violence never starts again. I mean, fascinating. And the third part follows Cleveland, the Cleveland PD and their near homicide unit, which is, I think, the only one in the state. You follow one outstanding cop as she talks to women and tries to get them to get the resources, and talks to them plainly and says, I am here because you are likely to be the next murder victim in the city. Do you understand what that means? And walks through them and helps them in all aspects of trying to get away from abusers. We also talked to someone in Washington, D.C. that is a one phone call service. They have a group, of course, but a one phone call service. So if police or anyone is out at a scene on a call and it involves domestic abuse at all or battery or something, they call one line and this person is the resource, whoever answers the phone, saying, I can put them in this shelter over here. Let's get them a gift card to a grocery store, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's so much in here in such a short little book. It is always very well written. There's little bits of humor just when you need it the most. It's outstanding. If you can stomach it, read this book. If you can't stomach it, read this book. I think this should be required reading for all adults. Quite honestly, it just so excellent. So excellent. I feel like I did a bad job describing all of these books because I liked them all. But they were really wonderful. So I look forward to seeing what you guys think in the comments. Let me know if you have read any of these books. If I missed things, I'm sure I missed a lot of things. Whew. If you have questions about them, anything at all, let me know below. I'd love to chat with you about this stuff. And I can't wait to see what my fellow judges thought about these books. And it's so exciting. I'm such a nerd, but I can't wait to see in both fiction and nonfiction in each group what fell away, what's moving forward, and then what kind of is getting grouped together into groups. Like, will there be another person stuck with another group of books that are like this, where it's doom and gloom in a pandemic? That was not cool. Or does someone get a lot of easier books? Or I'm excited to see how everything shakes out, excuse me, in the future. So I think that's enough yakking for me for this one time. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying healthy and staying safe, especially as a lot of states are opening back up again and everyone's starting to go out there, you know, wear a mask, wash your hands, all that good stuff. And I hope this finds you well. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.